Chapter 1, The Nitti Raid.
Anton Cermak, the mobbed-up mayor of Chicago, was born in Bohemia, but by his first birthday could be found in a New York City immigration center. His parents soon settled in Braidwood, Illinois, where Cermak worked in coal mines next to his father. The teenage Cermak moved to Chicago and made a success in business, shady businesses apparently, before climbing through Democratic circles, precinct captain, state legislature, alderman on the Chicago City Council, and more. By 1928, he was on top of the local Democratic Party, orchestrating a coalition of Germans, Czechs, Poles, and Jews, and using patronage to build his base. By 1931, he was running for mayor against Big Bill Thompson, a Republican who was corrupt even for Chicago. The Chicago outfit, the Capone mob essentially, knew Big Bill was attracting the wrong kind of attention, the federal kind, which is why the mob dropped Mayor Thompson and instead backed the also corrupt Cermak in his mayoral bid. Once elected to that office, though, as we depict in True Noir, Cermak aligned himself with minor bootleg gangs that he could control and manipulate. And on his first day in office as mayor, 10% Tony Cermak, so named for the kickbacks he demanded, promised the city of Chicago that he'd rid it of its gangsters before the Chicago World's Fair, the Century of Progress exhibition, which would open in the summer of 1933. Cermak's hoodlum squad consisted of Sergeants Harry Lang and Harry Miller. Miller was at one time kicked off the force for dealing narcotics. Lang was a former bagman for the previous mayor, Big Bill Thompson. We're talking gangsters with badges. Mid-morning on December 20, 1933, Tony Cermak summoned Miller and Lang to his office. Cermak sent the two Harrys to assassinate Nitti at the mob boss's office and wire room in the LaSalle Wacker building. The mayor's handpicked gangster, Ted Newberry, was reportedly with Cermak in his office when the orders were given. And Newberry promised the two Harrys, who made $100 a month, $15,000 for the job. Some sources say it would have been $15,000 each if they succeeded. They didn't. They shot Nitti all right, 3 to 5 times. Sources vary, but even so, Nitti lived. The two Harrys indeed pulled in an innocent cop for backup, much as Nate Heller is drafted unknowingly at the start of True Noir, Officer Chris Callahan. And that officer was put in a similar situation to the one Nate Heller finds himself in, squeezed between Cermak and Nitti over what Callahan's eventual testimony would be at Lang's trial. Well, for one thing, he was Nitto, not Nitti. But the latter was how he was widely known in both mob and police circles, and particularly in the press. There are indications he preferred Nitto. It's on his gravestone. But for my novel True Detective and the adaptation True Noir, I stayed with the more familiar Nitti. Francesco Raffaele Nitto was born in Angre, Italy on January 27, 1888, emigrating to the United States at age 12. His family settled in Brooklyn near his cousins, Al and Frank Capone. Moving to Chicago around 1913, he worked as a barber, fencing stolen goods and smuggling liquor on the side. After Capone stepped in for Johnny Torrio, who barely survived an assassination attempt, the new outfit boss turned to his first cousin, Frank Nitti, who was good with finances and who had exceptional organizational skills. Nitti gained the nickname The Enforcer, not because he was a gunman himself, but by arranging gangland murders with plenty of cushion between the homicides and himself and his cousin Al. After an 18-month stint for tax evasion, Nitti was placed in the leadership role when Capone was imprisoned on his own tax evasion charges. Nitti managed the distribution of liquor from Canada to Chicago speakeasies, making the outfit, as the Capone gang had come to be known, hundreds of millions of dollars. This is who Frank Nitti was when we meet him in True Noir. An odd sidebar to the two Harrys is that Harry Lang was film director William Friedkin's uncle. I heard this from Friedkin after staying in his guest house, and I left a copy of True Detective behind for the director. Talking to me, and in interviews, Friedkin seemed kind of proud of his uncle's nefarious history and sometimes described Lang as having brought in Frank Nitti and bragged that his uncle had shot Nitti 8 times in the stomach. Friedkin worked as a young man in a Chicago tavern that Harry Lang owned. And one wonders if the director of The French Connection and To Live and Die in L.A. didn't base his depiction of tough cops from his memory of his uncle and his uncle's cohorts on both sides of the law. Barney Ross was born Beryl Rasowski on December 23, 1909 in New York City. He was a rare triple title holder in boxing: world lightweight champ, junior welterweight champ, and welterweight champ during the 1930s. 2 years after Barney's birth, the Rasowski family moved to Chicago's Maxwell Street, a Jewish ghetto where they had a small grocery store. But when he was 14, Barney lost his father, who was killed trying to foil a robbery in the store. Following this, his mother had a nervous breakdown, and his younger siblings were put in an orphanage. Barney dropped out of school and became a petty thief himself, then an errand boy for Al Capone, a street roughneck, and a general hustler. But after winning a Golden Gloves amateur boxing championship in 1929, Barney began a professional boxing career. One of the investments encouraged by his managers was the Barney Ross Cocktail Lounge, although it was not a blind pig located where I put him and Nate Heller, rather on North Clark Street. Sources differ as to whether it opened before or after Prohibition ended, but I've seen a 1930 matchbook from the lounge. Barney's family was Orthodox, and a Shabbos Goy like Nate Heller would have been part of their lives. A Shabbos Goy is a non-Jew hired by a Jewish person to do work that the religion's laws prohibit on the Sabbath. The term comes from the Yiddish words Shabbos, Sabbath, and Goy, Gentile. Nate's father was an apostate Jew, which qualified Nate for the job. That Mayor Cermak took precautions after the Nitti raid, moving into the Morrison Hotel, is, like much of episode 1, true. And his trip to Florida was indeed out of a need to mend fences with President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt to make up for not supporting FDR at the Chicago-held Democratic Convention.